Don't give up on Christmas. Why did I choose this theme for this week? Well, because I think Christmas is getting a little difficult as we get older. It always seems, or can seem, that it's a bit of a challenge trying to get up for Christmas, doesn't it? The constant pressures of getting ready that's around. And not only that, of course, Christmas tends to be for many of us quite an expensive time of year. So it'd be easy to think, oh, well, let's give up this Christmas. But I believe as Christians who believe that Jesus is our saviour and came into this world at Christmas time, that we should celebrate the season and to encourage others to celebrate and to know the real reason for the season and trying to promote the season of Christmas, although some of our friends and things perhaps would prefer that we didn't celebrate Christmas at all. So that's my reason for going on at this period, at this time. So let's listen to the story of Christmas afresh. It all started with a young woman named Mary who had a visit from an angel. It's the opening scenes there from the Nativity Story. So, some reasons why people give up this Christmas. 3 reasons I've dug out this. First one is busyness. We all live such busy lives nowadays, doesn't it? As I was just saying to Lona before some of you joined us, I went over to my son's in Acton on Friday night to help out with the transport of the kids to various things. They'd all got different football competitions on. They didn't have enough cars to get them all around, so I went over there and helped with the transportation. And as we was talking a bit later, my sons, said to me, you see how busy it is in this household? I don't get a moment's peace on some nights of the week. We're ferrying all these kids all the way around and all that sort of thing. But it's so easy to get fed up and want to miss Christmas because of our busyness. One person who missed out on Christmas because he was busy was the innkeeper. Now, we all know the story, don't we, of how Joseph and Mary ended up in Bethlehem because of this census. And it was a busy time of the year, and they packed up and travelled all the way from Nazareth to Bethlehem because that was Joseph's hometown. That's where he needed to be registered and everything. And of course, she was due to deliver. And, when they got to Bethlehem, Mary was pretty sure the baby was definitely on his way. And Joseph is trying to find them some accommodation, and he knocks on the innkeeper's house. And of course, is turned away. And we know that story because of what it says in Luke. It says, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there was no room, no place at the inn. That's the clue we get. And we can all remember those nativity plays we've seen over the years, either at school or at church, when Mary and Joseph and the donkey go up to the door and knock on it, and the innkeeper comes out in various disguises and said, oh, I'm full up, I'm too busy, there's no room, go away. Or words to that effect. I mean, but from, of course, the innkeeper's perspective, he must have been quite pleased. Any innkeeper yesterday or today would be pleased if he was full up. That was good for business, wasn't it? He must be thanking the Romans no end that he was packed out. more money for him and to do again. And he couldn't be too bothered about a pregnant woman. He couldn't help anyway. But think about it. What did the innkeeper miss out on here? The Son of God could have been born in his inn. Can you imagine the PR that he would have had for years? Put a banner up, Son of God, born here. It would have been packed out more often than not, wouldn't he? A good business, but he was too busy. He missed the biggest business opportunity on earth because he was too busy. Well, I know that's exaggerating the story a bit, but this is what can happen if you're too busy to miss out on Christmas. There could be some big advantages that we can gain by fully enjoying the Christmas season, being part of it as much as we can, encouraging others, discussing it, reading it, and doing everything ourselves. So don't miss out on Christmas, because like that innkeeper, you could have missed them out on something that could have been exceptionally good. The second reason then was the familiarity of the story by the religious people. If you think about it, we read the story of the incarnation and the birth of Jesus, then there isn't one religious person in the story, is there? There's none. They missed out on the birth of God's Son. And why was that? They all knew that the Messiah sooner or later was going to be born, and rumors of it came about it from here and then, but they missed out. And is that why God actually never invited them? Because he knew they would be too busy to respond. The mistake of familiarity of the story meant that many missed out on the birth and the good news and everything that one entailed about the birth of Jesus then and still now. There was only one person that some people that got invited, and one was the wise men, wasn't it? The Magi. They didn't miss out. Let's familiarize ourselves with their story.
Matthew chapter 2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly, and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route.
So the Magi turn up in Jerusalem and go and to see Herod and ask him, what does he know about the birth of this new king of the Jews? They didn't want to miss out. They had travelled a long way. We don't know exactly where, but certainly a long, long way. They've been following this star. They knew of the prophecies of the birth of the Son of God. And they saw this sign in the sky as a sign that they should be part of all this. It was amazing what happened to all the Jewish astrologers and other people that are keeping an eye on the sky. Didn't they see this new star? Didn't they wonder what it was all about? Didn't they associate it with the prophecies that there were about the Messiah being born? And so they go up to the king. Well, they, of course, because they were important dignitaries, Herod had to see them, really. It would have been discourteous as king, Herod, not to. And of course, he was a bit miffed because he didn't know much about the birth of the Messiah, did he? Well, that's not surprising because Herod wasn't really a Jew anyway. He was only an adopted Jew. He hadn't got the foggiest idea about this king of Israel. And so he had to call in his advisors. So he sent these kings out into one of the waiting rooms whilst he sent out messengers to get the leaders, religious leaders and scholars and these advisors in. And the religious scholars certainly knew all about the birth of the Messiah in Bethlehem. And that's what he told. That's what they told Herod. And so Herod, I suspect, was a bit miffed about that. We'll come back to Herod in a bit later. But, you know, for hundreds of years, we know because of the writings that are around, not in the scriptures, but in other writings of the Jews, that lots of people were expectant and hoping that Messiah comes. They all knew what the prophecy of the book of Micah, the prophet Micah, said about the Saviour will be born in Bethlehem. Everybody knew this except, of course, King Herod. And but they didn't. The other thing is, now these kings turn up, these wise men who'd obviously seen something, and that must have excited the religious leaders of Jerusalem, surely, and even Herod. And none of them seemed to want to check it out. Why didn't Herod have them followed? Why didn't some of the priests go along with these magi to see what was going on? They weren't that interested, really. Perhaps they were too busy as well. So they were familiar with the story, but they didn't want to get that involved with it. So over familiarity with the story can put us off of missing the birth of Christ. So we must distinguish, I suppose, us today with us between the facts and the traditions surrounding the birth, because they can be a put off. Isn't it amazing? I expect there's a lot of intelligent people around today that participate in all the traditions of Christmas, but they're not too interested in sorting out what the real story and the real facts about it are. So they're really missing out on the benefits of Christmas. They may put up their lights, send out their Christmas cards, organise parties, puts up Christmas trees, arrange gifts for their friends and family, but they're not really truly celebrating what Christmas is all about. They're only following human traditions. And they're not going to get the benefit out of celebrating Christmas. You know, the Bible says their minds are full of darkness. They wander far from the life of God gives because they have closed their minds and hardened their hearts to the truth of Christmas story. So don't give up on the truth of Christmas and why it happened and why Christ was born in that manger. Thirdly, then, there was a fear about Christmas. Fear is the third thing that will cause us to miss the true meaning of Christmas this year, and what has caused people to miss the first Christmas. They're afraid of it. It wasn't the innkeeper's problem, and it wasn't the religious leader's problem, but it was Herod's problem. Herod feared the birth of the Christ. He was a shrewd politician. He was a great soldier, an orator, and a great builder. I mean, he built some magnificent buildings in Jerusalem, including rebuilt the temple, which people regarded as magnificent. But he wasn't a true Jew. He was an Arab, but a Roman citizen. And he went on the wings of his father, who was a great supporter, a friend of Julius Caesar. And it was his father's friendship with Julius Caesar, that got him this job as king and ruler of Israel with the Romans. He was given some role to manage, because he was a good administrator, a good soldier, to administrate Israel. And so he set himself up as a king, but he wasn't a real Jew. All the Jews hated Herod. And he took great pleasure in making sure that he was going to be the only king in Israel. We could say he was paranoid. He got paranoid over his wife, thinking that she would try and usurp his kingship. So he had her killed. Even his mother-in-law, who poked her nose in, she got killed. So did two of their sons, who had aspirations to becoming king well before his death. They wanted to overthrow him, and so they got killed. And in fact, 5 days before Herod died, he had the rest of his children, who were in and near Jerusalem, thrown into prison because he didn't want them to succeed him. He had all kinds of prominent Jews thrown into prison. And he left orders that the moment he died, they should all be killed. Why? Well, simply because he knew nobody would weep over his death, but they would weep over all those others that he killed. I mean, he was a real paranoid, schizophrenic Herod. But he was a frightened man, and he got even more frightened through the end of his reign, when he believed that the King of the Jews was going to be born in Bethlehem. But strangely enough, he didn't go after the kings. He waited a bit, and then he got them. Then he got all the children of Bethlehem slaughtered, didn't he? We know that the massacre of the innocents. It was classified in human history. So Herod was in fear, but we could be in fear too, because we fear that getting too close to God, to understanding that, will mean we lose our freedom. That's why people fear God today. Their fear of not being able to do what they want to do. They think they would lose their fun. They're afraid of becoming Christians because they don't like what they see. But we shouldn't give up on Christmas. So how do we make sure we still seek the new news from the good news this Christmas? Well, that's a bit of a mouthful of a sentence, isn't it? But what do I mean? Well, I mean that we should take a fresh look at the Christmas story every year, and perhaps especially this year, after all that's gone on in this past year, to seek something new out of the Christmas story that can lift our spirits. We will all read the Christmas story, I'm sure, over the next weeks. But remember what the psalmist said: be still and know that I'm God. We need to take time out of the busyness that can destroy our Christmas. to take time away from the familiarity of the story or the fear of what it might lead, and read the Christmas story anew. Perhaps read it in a different translation. Take a bit longer. Pray over it. Ask God to show you something new, because there's always things that come up new if we really are interested. We need to take time to pray and ask God to reveal something new, more new about the incarnation of Christ, whatever we've picked up before. Remember last week that we used this verse, do not be afraid, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all people. And we concentrated on all people, didn't we? That the news of Jesus this Christmas time was for all people. And we looked at that in depth. Well, this week we want to concentrate, I bring you good news of great joy, because the Christmas story is of great joy, because the truth of the Christmas wasn't that it's worth celebrating years ago, it's worth celebrating today. In the culture of those period 2,000 years ago, God didn't invite the priests and the civic leaders of Jerusalem to witness the birth. He gave the message to a group of intellectuals from outside the country and to the shepherds. Why did he give the good news to the shepherds? They were the lowest rung of people on the status ladder. They were lower than criminals. They were considered stinky, dirty, smelly, worthless people, because they weren't even allowed to worship in the temple, because they were regarded as unclean because of their work with animals and especially sheep. So who does God invite? He invites the shepherds, the outcasts, the people on the fringe, the people who no one else associated with, because he knew they would be interested. Now, they were settling down for the night. They'd rounded the sheep up and put them in their protective pens, and they just needed to be on guard, so to speak. But they were sitting there, and the angels came and brought this message, and they didn't need a second opportunity. They hurried off to see the birth of the King. They took their chance and never regretted it. They weren't going to claim that they were too busy. So what do we need to do? Well, we perhaps need to give more reverence for God, because the author of Proverbs says this: reverence for God adds hours to each day. Instead of being busy, if we take time out to look at the good news of Christmas and all it's about, perhaps we'll find we've got more time to enjoy it. There won't be other things that will distract us. There won't be other things that will pour in the stress. Give reverence for God. Give him time, and it would add hours to your life. That's pretty good message this Christmas time. And finally, just one more piece of advice. Don't be put off by those who demean Christmas. There are plenty of people around who I'm sure we all meet at some time that will run Christmas down. Don't have heed of what they say, because let's remember the Christmas message. Let's remember what Jesus said. He said, I have come so they may have life and have it in abundance. Jesus came into this world, born as a baby, like we were, grew up as a child, as a teenager, like we did. And he came so that we would live life and have it in its amazing abundance, with our eyes opened by the Spirit of God. For God didn't send his son into this world to condemn the world, but to save it from himself. I know many of us have had a tough year, a rough year, a sad year in many ways. And we all thought that this year couldn't have been as bad as last year, but it has. We all thought this COVID thing would be over by now, but it's not. But the historical story of the incarnation is still good news. It's still uplifting news. It's still news of hope and joy. It's still a heartwarming miracle that the God and creator of this world came to demonstrate in a very powerful way that he wanted us to be part of his family, and this was the way that broke down the barrier of sin so that we could be God's friends, we could come his children, and as his children enjoy all that he's brought to us this Christmas time. So don't give up on Christmas. Enjoy it and celebrate.